And now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So first we have Dr. Malik Small. Dr. Small is a middle school principal in the community of East New York, Brooklyn, with over 10 years of experience in educational leadership, both in charter as well as district schools. Dr. Small is a passionate advocate for social justice, restorative practices, culturally responsive education, equity in schools, and empowering children, families, and community to close the opportunity gap that persists due to institutionalized racism. Dr. Small is a public speaker and frequent guest and panelist in forums that include the Heather B Show, Raw Perspective, and Dr. Selma B Show. Also proud member, all three of you proud members of the Off School Grounds Coalition that we've had represented very well here before. Dr. Small also sits as a board member on the Mount Vernon Youth Board, as well as a member of Eagle Foundation BERC Pilot Design Team for Equity Action Plan. Currently working on several books and recently published in the National Association of Secondary School Principals Journal. Congratulations on that, and welcome, Dr. Small. Thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Next, we have Deputy Superintendent Fia Davis. Fia is an educational leader who believes she is called to serve. Her 26-year career in the New York City Department of Education is a demonstration of her service. Her stated mission is to motivate children and adults to see and achieve their highest potential despite their circumstances. She's committed to cultivating joy, transformation, and equity-focused leadership. Ms. Davis currently serves as Deputy Superintendent of Community School District 10, the fourth largest district in New York City, educating over 32,000 students. As Deputy Superintendent, she helped lead her district during the pandemic and into homecoming 2021, served as principal for 15 years, most recently at Pathway College's preparatory school, secondary 6 through 12, and early college high school. Title I, which enrolls 100% students of color. Upon her arrival at Pathways, she declared that the school would be a pathway into college and career for all students. And in her 4 years there, Pathways graduation rate rose from 67% to 94%, no small feat. Leadership earned her a spot in the 2019-2020 cohort of the National Con Fellowship for Distinguished Principals at Columbia University. And in 2006, she founded the Urban Assembly School for the Performing Arts. Also a member of the Off Schools Ground Coalition, and currently pursuing her doctorate at Fordham University. Welcome, Ms. Davis. We are so thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Who was that?
Pretty good, huh? And then last but not least, we have Principal Anisha Jacko. Principal Jacko is an authentic, bold, and compassionate leader with over 22 years of instructional coaching, operational planning, administrative, and financial management experience in a large urban school district. Undergraduate degree at Hampton University, Virginia, master's from Toro College in special education and early childhood education. Let's see, Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, specializing in literacy and post in educational leadership. President and owner of The Results Are In LLC. Primary goal is to connect the world through meaningful interactions and talk. Serves as a licensed minister at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York, an active community leader serving in a number of organizations for over 20 years, collaborates with leaders across the globe with Off Schools Grounds Coalition to impact schools and communities, and is an active member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, Jack and Jill of America. Audacity to Speak is the first book in her series to support others to unmute and to live the life of their dreams. Principal Jacko lives in Queens with her husband and 2 children. Welcome. You're busy too. All of you are busy. Appreciate you all taking the time to join us for this conversation today. My name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization. My background is I'm a school psychologist, come from the world of public ed. I came over to the WhyTry organization about 7 years ago. I oversee training and research. I spend most of my time training educators and mental health professionals these days throughout the country, both in person and via Zoom. But one of my very, very favorite things that I get to do is to lead out, moderate the discussion on these webinars where we get to just bring incredible people together to share ideas around these topics that really are impacting all of us. And today is no exception. I'm thrilled about both the panel and the content that we have. We're going to go for about an hour today, depending on how the discussion goes. We may go a couple minutes over or a couple minutes under, but I think my favorite way to do it is to just jump right into it. So I'm going to remove the spotlights from everybody, and I'll set us up with our intro question, and then let our panel get right to it. So I thought it might be helpful if you just briefly tell us a little bit about kind of what you've been up to over the last 1 to 2 years, specifically what your areas of focus have been within your districts, within your schools, within your roles that you have there. Let's go for this first one in this order. Let's go with Principal Jacko, Deputy Superintendent Davis, and then Dr. Small.
All right. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. It's fascinating that you asked that question, because it reminds me of when I started my career a little bit, I would say in 99, 2000, and 9/11 hit. And New York City, we halted. We changed the way we began school, understanding 9/11 started the first day of school. So imagine greeting new students into your building and being concerned about safety. Similar, that makes me think of now in the pandemic, we did a major halt to school. And so I was in a different position then. I was the director of early childhood, managing 8 pre-K sites of like over 600 4-year-olds. So it came back to being in Manhattan and understanding how important it was for safety. And so my current work as a new principal in Queens has been also that understanding that school is a safe place and reminding families of how important it is to show up and be in school and to take care of those who I lead, right? And so given what happened just recently in Texas, I think I had my highest attendance rate, which made me feel really good because my parents feel comfortable bringing their children to school. And so I want to stop there. So I make sure that I answer the question succinctly. But I would say my main goal is to provide a safe and nurturing environment for my school community and my students to know that they're safe in school.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So I guess I'm up next. Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. The last 2 years have been interesting. I accepted a position as deputy superintendent right before the pandemic hit. I then had to tell my superintendent, I cannot leave my school in the midst of a global pandemic. I have to stay and finish the year because I needed to serve the amazing community of Pathways where I was honored to lead. And then I stepped into being a deputy superintendent in the midst of quarantine, in the midst of a pandemic. And so I have spent the last 2 years, when you talk about resilience and you think about joy, you cannot lead people who you do not love. You have to love them. And I have the amazing responsibility, the charge, the calling of leading and supporting principals. And so I have to love them. And my last 2 years have been spent with being with principals, supporting them through moments of crisis, through moments of tears, through tragedy. I serve in the Bronx where the tragic fire happened a couple of months ago, right in our district. And it's really been about, for year one, keeping our finger in the dam so it just didn't break, right? But year two, as you mentioned when you introduced me, Homecoming 2021, our amazing former chancellor had all of us, every leader in New York City, spent the first week of school showing up in person to our schools. So 1 week I hit 25 schools, JC. My whole body hurt by Friday, but my spirit was soaring because I got to see the amazing work that principals were doing to bring our babies back. And if you know Beyonce's Homecoming, you know the kind of energy that we were walking into. And so I've spent my last 2 years supporting principals, loving on them, helping them strategize on problems, and of course, evaluating them. But it has been a labor of love and really looking for ways to cultivate joy for leaders, because adults need what children need.
Amen to that. That's incredible. Thank you. Dr. Small.
And you know, Jason, it's very difficult to follow behind Miss Fia Davis and Miss Jacko. But I think I'm up to the task, right? You know, last 2 years really has been about reimagining, because we're not just in the education business, we are truly in the business of saving lives. Every life that we don't positively touch, that we don't positively shape and mold so that their zip codes don't become their destinations by way of trajectory, we stand squarely at the gates of that. We are the gatekeepers of the future, because the minds and the hearts that we impact in the communities that we serve truly will be those who will then sit in your seat and sit in our seats and serve as our doctors and our lawyers and our policemen and our firemen. So we are the gatekeepers to the future. We are the gatekeepers to opportunity, the gatekeepers for exposure, the gatekeepers for children's trajectories. So really reimagining what that looks like and what it means in a world that is rapidly changing, in a world that right now has challenges that we probably don't have the answer to, but the children that we love on, the children that we serve, the children that we prepare, they have the answers. The answer lives with them. And so ensuring that we're creating safe spaces for them. And when I say safe spaces, we're not just talking about physically safe spaces. We're talking about emotionally safe spaces, socially safe spaces, spiritually safe spaces. Standing at taking on the charge and standing at those gates and being the gatekeepers of all that is sacred and beautiful for our children, so that they can take care of us when they're called on to do that. That's what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and really doing the work of not just reimagining, but going from reimagination to implementation of all of those things that I just mentioned.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And you made me realize I'm feeling a little bit guilty right now. I did not do a proper job. I introduced all of you as individuals, but maybe because I'm just too familiar with the group. One of the things that struck me when you all were talking, so you all are part of this group, the Off Schools Grounds Coalition, and I'm sure Mark can maybe put some links up in the chat, and we'll reference them more throughout. But it's this incredible group of educators that is really committed to building community, building schools, and really kind of providing that safety for the kiddos. And I realized I needed to do justice to this group as well, and make sure I called them out. Please.
If I may help you out. So we represent what I call the mighty OSG, Off School Grounds Coalition. We meet every Thursday. You can follow the official OSG on Instagram. I'm sure Cousin Mark will put that in the chat. Shout out to Mark Merrill. And we are a coalition of educators, but also people who are in the industry. There's an MD who's a part of OSG. And we are a community. You don't have to be an educator to come, but you do have to be committed to changing the narrative for children. And so we invite you, and shout out to our founder and CEO, Dr. Dennis B. McKeezy, and to his co-visionary, Lays Elliott, and the First Lady, Denise McKeezy, for what they do in service to children and in service to all of us. So come on Thursday, 4 p.m., right on Zoom, and you can follow us on Instagram and come see what the mighty OSG is about.
And so I'll take that next layup, because Jason, when you ask what did we do during the pandemic, this is what we did. I didn't know Dr. Malik. I mean, we had our CFG group with the coming Dr. Davis, but there was a special alignment that happened with this group. And so I would say during the pandemic, something amazing did happen, and that was the alignment across the globe. And I think that's when you take your seat as a community leader, right? You understand that it's more than just the seat. It's about the bag, it's about the merch, it's about the lives, right? And it's about the dreams, right? And so I think this is what the evidence or the residue of the pandemic, we call a plandemic. It's answering your call, right? And knowing what is for you. And so this is what is an evidence of what happened in 2020.
Well, thank you for that layup, because I think Malik and I would be remiss if we let this conversation go any further without mentioning, speaking of alignment, if you've ever had the experience where you meet a friend or a colleague and there is just a magic that happens when you get to share your experience, share your learning and your leadership. And Malik and I have been on a few panels together, quite a few, and we had the amazing vision to launch a show. And so we are the co-hosts of Complimentary Conversation, which is aired on Fox Soul, currently airs on the Dame Dash Network, on YouTube, and also will be shooting season 2 this upcoming summer. And so I needed to shout out my friend and my brother and I. We host Complimentary Conversations. You can follow us on IG and take a look at our work. And we hope you'll go over and watch us on the Dame Dash Network.
And so I'm going to add one small piece. You know, when you think about OSG, though we're the foundation are those of us who are in education, OSG really is the intersection where education, finance, politics, and entertainment meet. And so you'll have the movers and shakers and change makers, whether they're congressmen or senators, or whether they're music or television or media moguls, or whether it be educators, or whether it be finance people. OSG is where those 4 sectors kind of meet and coalesce for the benefit of children and community.
And so when you think of 1920, what was that? What does that look like? Well, bring it on to 2020. This is the Renaissance in the metaverse.
In the metaverse.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving that foundation. I think it's a great foundation to jump right into kind of the heart of the subject matter now, which is this idea of resilience and reclaiming joy. And I want to start, you know, there's 2 ways we can look at this. We can talk about this in reference to our students, to our kiddos that we work with, and also for us as the adult staff. I want to start with a discussion around the student side of it. I've heard a few of you use the term, and it's a common term in education, but it's an important term. I've heard a few of you talk about building capacity for our students. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about that in relation specifically to resilience. How has your approach to building capacity for student resilience evolved? Or maybe remain the same or been reaffirmed over the last few years? What specifically has been your approach to that? Let's go with Miss Davis, Dr. Small, and then Principal Jacko to round out that one.
Resilience is intentional, right? We have to create cultures for our children. If you think about 2 years ago, serving as principal for 15 years, when I got to Queens, the first thing I discovered is our students needed social emotional support. And this is pre-pandemic. You know, sometimes in our culture, we believe that Black and brown babies go to church to figure it out, to figure out their struggles. But really, we also have to be focused and intentional about mental health and mental wellness and social emotional learning. So I believe in restorative practice, which creates the space for children to be resilient. I believe in mental health, but making sure that in schools, on site, children and families understand that they need resources and that there are resources present for them right there in school and on site. The other part of building resilience is the support we create for the adults. If the adults who stand before our children are not healthy and are not well and don't feel safe, then they cannot effectively service our children, facilitate learning, and love them as the front line. And so if teachers are the infantry of education in the classroom, then principals are the infantry of leadership. And my work as deputy superintendent is to make sure that I am setting up the environment so that principals can be resilient and so that they understand that there's a safe space. So a colleague and I, during the pandemic, we were all on Zoom anyway, created something called the Principals Check-In. And it came out of a conversation that I had with Anisha Jacko, who's here with us. And the Principals Check-In was a space at 10 a.m. and at 3 p.m. We did it every 2 weeks. And it was an open invitation to principals, come hang out, share, talk, cry, vent, no rules. The only thing that we did every time we met was I made everyone begin with a highlight, because when you're cultivating joy and resilience, you have to be intentional about inviting people to a happy space, a warm space. So resilience is intentional. You cannot be casual about it, because anything you're casual about becomes a casualty. So in cultivating resilience, we have to think about, as a district leader, children, adults, teachers, families, and of course, our principals. And I'll pass the mic.
There's a word that you use several times, Fia, that I think is very apropos to this conversation, and it's the word cultivating, right? We plant seeds, but if you plant a seed and there's no cultivation, nothing will grow. So we're in the business, like you said, of cultivating seeds, our children being those seeds. And so I heard an analogy, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit. If you look at a beautiful rose bush, and a beautiful rose bush is not doing so well, you don't question the rose bush. You look at the environment, right? What's the environment that's impacting that rose bush that's going to determine how beautifully it blooms or not? And so again, when we think about resilience, we have an acronym that I use with my students. We call them STARS: successful, talented, articulate, resilient scholars, right? And so built even in that acronym is the idea of resiliency. You mentioned, Jason, capacity, right? For me, capacity equals confidence. And so when we're able to create capacity and give children the tools that they need, and I'm not talking about reading and writing and arithmetic, we're not talking about those tools, because you can't even get to the academics without first getting to the hearts. I believe that as educators and as leaders, if we maintain a heart that is childlike, it'll allow us to speak to the hearts of children. So we play a lot, right? But it's productive play. And in that play, we're able to build capacity. I believe that it's very important to tool children with the capacity and knowledge that they have opportunities, and create many opportunities for them to have voice. So even on all my adult committees, we have children that sit on those committees so that they can understand that their voice matters, so that they can understand that their thoughts matter, so that they can understand that their input matters. Because again, we have these youngsters just for a couple of years. They're only youngsters for a couple of years. They're adults for 4 times the length, if they're lucky. And I don't really want to say lucky, because our hopes and dreams are that they too will one day have gray hair like some of us have, right? But if we give them and cultivate and nurture the capacity for them to understand that they have worth, right? That when they look in the mirror and they see someone who's worthy, because you've given them the tools and built the capacity for them to then have confidence in how they step out into the world, and how they step out into their own households, how they step out into their communities, then they will be successful. And if we're able to do it in a way that's culturally responsive, and I know a lot of times when we speak cultural responsiveness, we automatically think Black and brown, but let's face it, each and every one of us, no matter what color we are, have a culture, right? And so whatever your culture you come from, understanding that, digging into who you are, whatever that culture is, whatever your experiences, your family's experience have been, if you stand firm in who you are, you're able to then have a vantage point to look out onto the rest of the world. So we spend a lot of time helping children to understand who they are, to be able to tap into and recognize their identity. So again, they're anchored in a place that allows them to be strong as they look out onto the world and go about their particular endeavors. So again, spending a lot of times developing children's social, emotional, spiritual competencies, so that in doing so, you can begin the work of engaging them in academics. That's what we do. And those are the things that are important, because you can't get to the academics if you haven't first created a safe space in the hearts for children.
That is awesome. Real quick, Dr. Malik, a couple people have asked if you could repeat what that acronym STARS stood for.
Successful, talented, articulate, reflective scholars.
Thank you. Principal Jacko, talk a little bit about building capacity for resilience for your kiddos.
That's a big, big question, because I believe the pandemic was a great equalizer. And I say that because it didn't matter how many degrees you had. It didn't matter your zip code. We all had to stop. And there's so many of our children who live in communities and spaces that you don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. And so when you await to take that test, and 2 years ago, when you took a COVID test, you didn't know if you were going to be alive. You didn't know how you were going to get your food. Your basic necessities, when you think of Maslow hierarchy of needs, we weren't even thinking about self-actualization. We were just trying to be safe. And so when I think about where we have grown to, I do say that we had a great equalizer, as it didn't matter if you were a principal or a new teacher. We were all new teachers trying to unmute and to get on Zoom or Google Meet. We can't hear you. Share your screen or don't. I think it gave us permission to give our children a voice. And so I found Clubhouse, right? And so you got to talk, and talking matters. And so I want to say it empowered our children to learn to use their voice. And it gave our children the opportunity. There's so many children who are homebound, who don't have the opportunity to be at school. And so I had a student who has never been in school, got to come to school, and our kids related, connected with him, who he had cancer. His name was King, and he never had the opportunity to be in school. And so they both had that trauma-bound experience of being at home and knowing what that can feel like to not have someone to talk to, or not having the lunch lady to say good morning, or not having the crossing guard to say welcome to school, right? And so when our students had a chance to meet King, who was homebound from cancer, we now know what we need to do a little differently. And we need to always include our children at the table. And so at my school, I'm very clear on being students who thrive. And so T is for time on task. H is for hot questions, higher order thinking. R is making sure that things are relevant. Making sure that I is intentional. B, making sure that we give our students a voice. And E is equity. And it's not just race and gender. Are we having equitable spaces, equitable materials, equitable curriculum, and meeting the standards? And so when we give students the opportunity to have student agency and to take ownership of their learning, it's a whole new world. They are now teaching us what we need to do and how we need to show up for them. And keeping them as the centerpiece of my work has been what I have been laser focused on at our school. And so when we teach them our miracle morning practices of speaking life into themselves every morning, we start every morning with an affirmation. I am curious. I am of value. I am greater than what I came from, and I have a great future ahead of us, and everything is right about you. Like, what shifts for us when we ask, what went right today? Right? It changes how we show up. And so for me, resiliency comes from empowering our students to use their voice.
Oh my goodness, I got so many thoughts. This is incredible. The equity piece, several of you mentioned, I think it has so much more depth than people realize. We preach a thing in the WhyTry model called surrendering the one-up relationship. And at the core, it is, you could kind of compare it to almost like a client valued, or excuse me, like a client-centered approach in a therapeutic model. But the idea is that, we have this systemic idea of equity, but there's also equity within a relationship, like just how we value one another as humans. And I think you all represent that really, really well. And it really contributes positively to, you know, a good trauma-informed model, a place where kids feel safe. And then this idea keeps coming up of, you know, you're talking about joy, and we're going to dig into this more, but hope, joy and hope, I feel like are very connected. And hope is an integral ingredient in resilience. When you dig into resilience research, like you can't really have resilience without hope. They're almost necessary for one another. And conversely, when hope starts to die, when joy starts to die, the resilience starts to go out the window as well. So I'm so pumped about where this is going. I'm wondering, can we talk a little bit about some strategies then? Because, you know, we've talked about big picture, what are we doing to help our kiddos? Let's stay on the topic of our students, of our kids. What are some things that you have done then, or you found yourself doing, or you're in the process of doing, specific strategy wise, to help students find their joy, to help students try to build that resilience? Any specifics that you could share with our attendees? Because I know our attendees are always really hungry for good ideas that they can learn from. For this one, let's go Dr. Small, Principal Jacko, and Miss Davis. Let's go in that order.
So I would say, you know, a lot of times we forget when we're working with children that children are just younger adults, right? And so if we look at it through that lens and think about the things that bring us joy, right? Music brings me joy. We welcome the children into our music and into the building every morning with music. It's a whole entire party as soon as you walk through the door, and we welcome them with high fives and fist bumps and make them feel like superstars. Again, everyone wants to feel validated. So first thing you come in that door in the morning, we're going to validate you. We're going to ensure that you know that we love and care and recognize you, and that we want you to have a great time today. And so again, welcoming them in the same way that as adults, we would want to be welcomed. As adults, something as simple as hugs are important, right? And so we give out free hugs all day long, making sure, again, that the connection, that human connection is where it starts. You can't teach a child, number one, if you're afraid of him. You can't teach a child if you can't relate to her. You can't teach a child if you don't see your own children, your own nieces and nephews, your own godchildren in front of you. If when you look through your own mind's eye, when you look out onto your classroom, if you don't see your children, then you don't belong in that classroom. And so it even starts with hiring practices. I was having a conversation earlier today about my hiring practices and my interview practices. If I'm interviewing you and in the course of that interview, you say these children or those children, I will end the interview and you can go interview with someone else. Because it's very important that if you're going to be in front of our children, that you see yourself as a surrogate parent. There's a Latin term and a legal term, in locus parenti, right? And I let parents know, my 6th grade parents, when they come in for orientation, I say, hey, listen, we need to talk. I need you to either agree or not agree. When you drop your child off, the men here become dad and uncle, and the women here become moms and aunties. If that's something you can get with, then we're going to welcome you with open arms. If that's not quite your bag, you know, it's okay. You can find another school. I've never had anyone find another school. So again, we take this thing very seriously. Before I worked in education, I worked in finance and dealt with investments and things. And so I kind of look at this business the same way. Parents are our clients. They bring to us their most valuable commodity, which is their children. And it's our jobs to give them a return on their investment. If we return their child to them and it's lost value, or there's no return on that investment, we have not done our job. And so we have to take it that seriously, this work that we're doing. And so my strategies, again, treat our children the same way we would treat our own. View them as we view our own. Understand, I have another policy. A parent might come in upset. A parent might come in stressed. You know, parent might not like me when they walk in, but if I'm doing my job correctly, they're going to leave with a smile on their face. They're going to leave happy, and that's our responsibility. We should not sit in this seat if we allow a parent to walk away dissatisfied or upset at us. It's okay to come in that way. It's not okay to leave that way. So it really is it's not just a strategy, it's a way of life. It's how we do what we do. And it just so happens we also are able to build great careers around it, but I would do it for free, because these are my children and my brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles. They're mine, they belong to me, and I take it very seriously that I'm able to ensure that their 3 years with me are a great and fantastic experience.
I love it. So good. Thank you. Let's go with Principal Jacko. How have you been approaching this? Any specific strategies you can share?
Yeah. So I think I would answer this question. You have to show up as your authentic self. I'm an authentic, bold, and compassionate leader. And with that said, I grew up in a marching band, played the tenor sax. So I know how to get in step. I know how to play. I know how to keep in tune, and I know how to mark with the rest of the crew. And so the same thing happens for our students. They come to us with so many different talents. And it's my job to curate spaces that create an awesome museum of learners. And so I would like to connect that as a metaphor for when you go to a museum, you have different floors, different exhibits. That's what our schools should be. 1, joyful. 2, are you tapping into their gifts? You have to be an archaeologist. You have to go into the muck, right? And find, do you sing? Do you act? Can you sew? Can you dance? And finding, as an instructional leader, also being in my community and walking across the street to the mosque and asking, do you have this opportunity? I have a book club happening, bringing different artists and different authors who look like our children. So when I say to you that we're creating a life of our dreams, it's making sure that I have access to the community and to those around us of business. Do it here. We have golf happening. We have our students right now in a self-contained class, met with Leroy Campbell last year on Zoom and created a picture that is not only going to be at the Met next week, but is also going to be at Times Square in a pandemic. So don't tell me what is not possible. That's happening in a pandemic. A student in self-contained in 4th grade from Queens will be at Times Square with his artwork inspired by the Miracle Morning Affirmation and Leroy Campbell. Come on, what were we saying? It's about curating spaces and making sure that we're showing up for kids, and to Dr. Small's point, finding talent and bringing it here. That's the work. That's the work. Curating spaces that help our children to thrive.
Oh my goodness, I love it. That's great. Miss Davis, you want to
I can hear
us
them
on this
all
one?
day. So strategies. First thing, with my principal hat on, and I'm committed to never forgetting what that seat is like, where's the fun factor at school? What are you doing as school leaders, as teachers, to intentionally dedicate days, times of the day for pure fun? And so my thing was, what are we doing at least once a month where the day, and learning is still happening, but the day is dedicated to the fun factor? And so that might be Super Day. I'm walking around with my cape on Halloween. I'm in costume on the curb, full costume every Halloween. How are you modeling as leaders that joy should happen for adults and children at school? So intentionally create and design and plan a year of the fun factor. Then, and those are monthly events centered on joy that will elevate the energy and the atmosphere at your schools. The other part, as principal, my choice, greet at the front door in the morning. So I think sometimes I know sometimes principals do way too much because they get a little confused about who they are as the executive. They think they need to do 17 different jobs, right? But I believe that as principals, you should either greet in the morning or be outside at the end of the day. Now, I know elementary school principals feel differently about this, so I'm not going to debate. However, my thing was when you drop your babies off at school, when they come walking down the block from the bus stop, they'll be coming to me and they'll see me. And I'm the first person who says good morning. And it's a great day to learn today. And the other thing, to my colleague, Principal Jacko's point is be your authentic self. So some days I'm going to be outside in my Tokyo 1 Jordans and my kids are going to notice that they need to match my fly while I'm outside. Other days I might be in some red bottom heels. It depends on how I feel. But who I am going to be is my authentic self. I'm a Black woman from South Jamaica, Queens. And I look like you, I might sound like you. However, I am right here as the leader of this school, which means you can do it too. Leaders, identify who you are and what you believe. There's this notion of this persona of leadership, how you have to show up as a district leader or a principal or even a teacher. And who I am is the possibility of vulnerability, transformation, and love. And I carry those possibilities into every space that I encounter. And so when you think about strategies, be very clear about who you are and your values so that you show up as your authentic self and students experience the authentic you. The other piece, district leaders, be available to your principals. It should not be that they're only calling you when something bad has happened or they need to self-report an issue. They should also call you when they want to celebrate and they're proud of it and they want you to come over and see it, even if it's 20 minutes in a day. Make yourself available to them and allow them to invite you and tell them it's okay to do that. Because some of them will hide. Some people don't want to deal with the boss at all unless they have to. And the last thing I'll leave you with, I am, someone called me a data diva. I believe in the numbers. And so all of this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, making sure that our kids are safe and fed and happy. If you are not moving student achievement, if children are not learning, if you're a high school leader and they're not graduating at the highest levels, then for what and for whom? And so deliver on student achievement if you're gonna do all of this. Because there are levels to dopeness. And I came to be all the way dope.
Oh,
I'm going to leave
my
my
goodness.
capacity now, Jason.
That should be gospel. There are levels of dopeness. That's fantastic.
Is all the way dope one word?
It's all the way dope, yes. Hashtag all the way dope.
I was gonna say, it is if you put a hashtag in front of it, then it definitely is.
Hashtag all the way dope.
Ms. Davis, that is a perfect segue into where I want to go next. I want to make sure we have some time to talk about how the grown-ups in the room, the grown-ups in the buildings the grown-ups in this webinar can try to reclaim some of their joy. Because if we're being honest, this is the feedback. You know, I go out and I have worked with thousands of educators and mental health professionals over the last 2 years. And the constant feedback that I keep getting is just how hard this has been. There's a lot of people that are struggling, that are hurting, you know, they're dealing with their own challenges and then the challenges within the schools. And when some of these tragic events happen, they impact all of us in different ways and it all kind of piles on. I want to talk about your approach and what advice you would give to other professionals to try to reclaim their joy in this profession. And one of the things that maybe some of you, if you feel up to it, could address, because it's come up in previous conversation, and I'm really intrigued by this idea. I've heard you talk about reimagining relationships, and somehow in my mind, it feels like that may be a key piece to trying to reclaim some of our joy as educators in what has become, you know, a tough space, a political battleground in a lot of places. This world of education it's a tough gig right now for a lot of people. Let's go with Principal Jacko, Ms. Davis, and Dr. Small on this one.
That's a big question, Jason, because you have to start with yourself. And I remember having COVID in 2020, and I didn't know if I was going to be alive for my children. And my son Sai is 11 now, and I have Avi who's 9. And to think about having a conversation with them, if I'm not here, who do you want to live with? So when you think about as an adult who's leading other adults, I would be very fraudulent if I did not create space and a place for people to show up emotionally. And so answering my call during the pandemic happened as well, where I became a licensed minister. And I would say finding a community on Clubhouse called Miracle Morning has been extremely life-changing. And so when you think of the savers, silence, waking up in the morning for 6 minutes, practicing silence, a positive affirmation, visualizing what you want for the day, exercise, still working on that, reading every day and scribing. You can win the day by just how you start. And so one of the strategies, I would say you have to take care of yourself first. That self-care, you have to pause and take care of yourself, because you can't take care of others without checking in with yourself first. And so in understanding for me about meeting this community, I have been able to model for my staff and children how I stop and pause. And meeting Dr. Jill with the bio codes has been incredible, because it teaches me how to check myself before I wreck myself, right? You don't want to be strong and wrong, right? And knowing when you need to take an evaluation and look at, is this really a diss, right? Saying thank you when people offer you things. And so modeling for teachers of how to show up for each other, having essential agreements, thinking about the Baldrige model. There's so many things about Lencioni and developing a team, honoring that tension is a part of life. When the wind blows, the tree blows, and it's tension, but that's what it does. That's what we are looking at nature. And so what I would say to answer this question, for me, having the Miracle Morning practice, having ways of self-care. So however, whatever faith, whatever it is that you need to do to stop and reflect and to give yourself some space to meditate. The 21-day abundance challenge was incredible, because it just teaches you how to be committed to something. And so when we are committed to our own self-care, when you exude the confidence and love for yourself, others will feed off of that. And so when you're modeling that for adults, Jason, I believe giving them tools like that is so helpful, but also creating spaces for the staff to have diffusers, right? Having essential oils. Our Miracle Morning group, we have fresh tangerines and fruit in the principal's office. That's what you come in, you get a fruit, right? Because orange changes your mood. So aren't you glad you came to school today, right? So creating these spaces and places of healthy eating, and our vibes gotta be right, right? So, I love the music, Dr. Malik, right? But that's what I'm saying, like, it's about being authentic. If I like it and need it, then you're gonna like it and need it. But then also asking, what do you need? And giving you some time to try to figure it out. So I think this is what, when we say this has been a great equalizer, knowing there were a lot of things that weren't working in school before. And so now you all been televised. It's all on display and Instagram, right? You can see it, you being exposed. And so I think that's what I like about this opportunity. I would say, in closing, Miracle Morning, practicing the savers, and Dr. Jill by codes, and knowing that everything is right about you has been key for me, Jason. Thank you.
Really good. Thank you. I love that. Ms. Davis.
So I love what Principal Jacko shared, and thinking about reclaiming your joy. Joy is a practice for equity. And when Dr. Goldie Muhammad talks about her Hill model, right? The Hill pedagogy, she talks about cultivating joy. So making sure that we create the space for our children and for the adults with intentionality. And how do you do that? The first thing is, and Principal Jacko mentioned some of them. As a leader, you have to have an attitude of gratitude and understand that the adults who show up to school, no matter what title they have, they are teachers because they have a hand in educating your children. And so how do you demonstrate your attitude of gratitude as a leader? It might be as simple as, I remember on a snow day in 2019, pre-pandemic, I know what my teachers had to do to get to school. And I knew that the children at my former school, we were gonna have almost 90% attendance even on a snow day because we averaged almost 95 when it wasn't snowing. And so what I did is, to one of my keepers of the fun, I said, can you get comfort food and lunch for everyone on me today? And it was just my way as a principal, out of my own pocket, to say thank you, because I know what you had to do. I know you had to get up early and clean the car and get the babies and do whatever you had to do for these babies. It's food does always work, but that was one thing about reclaiming joy. The other part is to model your reclamation of joy as a leader. What do? Breathing with your staff, leading meditation, hoping that the gardener doesn't show up while you're on a webinar, right? Which is happening right now. But I would add, talking about what you do for your self-care. If you're a lady, go get your, or man, whomever you might be, go get your hair and nails done. Do the things that will make you feel good, exercise, and then have fun with your community. Laugh with them, create traditions, be with your people so that you reclaim the things that make you feel good. And I say this, and I say this very seriously. And if you can't do that in education, if you don't find moments of joy, please leave. Our children need people who love them and choose them. And so if you know that as I speak, that does not resonate and speak into your heart and your soul, I want you to figure out what your calling is and your purpose, but we don't want you here. And I'll leave it at that. Reclaim your joy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr.
Hey,
Small, you're up.
To me, Jason. You always make me follow. Man, listen, the late great Steve Jobs also said the same thing. If you wake up and you realize you no longer, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but if you wake up and you're no longer enjoying what you do, please find something else to do. Steve Jobs said that. I tell my teachers, like Biggie said, UPS is hiring, right? If this ain't the place for you, you know, there's some other things. We're not mad at you. You know, I'll even help you buy a brown uniform. But anyway, that's a sidebar. You know, as school leaders, we are the architects of the organizational dynamics that we need. I understand that happy teachers equal happy children. And so for us, we spend a significant amount of time and investment around ensuring that we're creating spaces of mindfulness for teachers so that they can in turn create mindful spaces for children. So bringing mindfulness practices as a regular practice, as a mandate, right? Again, providing that for teachers. We don't open up a meeting without a mindfulness practice before even going into the agenda. When I meet with my cabinet, we've made it a regular practice to open up our cabinet meeting by shutting down our computer and opening up with positive affirmations so that we can set the space for the work. And we do that every single time. And again, big shout out to the Miracle Morning, because we bring those practices into the boardroom, into the cabinet meetings and into the staff meetings, and then bring it into classrooms, right? We recognize that, again, as we're looking to ensure, as the architects of the organizational dynamics that we sit at the head of, that we're recognizing that every teacher has leadership potential, and also recognizing that leadership is not a title, it's a behavior. So how do we tap into those behaviors so that we create capacity in teachers to be leaders at scale, depending on where and what it is that they're doing in the building, because every building, and people who are not in education don't realize teachers don't just teach, because schools don't just need teachers, right? And so how do we nurture that leadership potential and that leadership in every member of the school community, from the janitor to the principal, and ensuring that that's happening? Darfur and Marzano often speak about the professional learning communities, and I like to always speak to my team about what does it mean to be a critical friend, right? Because there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, right? It's okay to empathize, whether it's with your colleague or a student. It's not okay to be sympathetic in a way that then reduces capacity. And so I always say you teach what you accept, right? And again, studies show that the biggest difference between success and non-success of students who graduate from high school and go into college prepared or not prepared, when you look at students from affluent communities, the only difference is the level of expectations that was placed in front of them. And so when you look at Black and brown students graduating from high school, but only being at an 8th grade level and not being ready for that first year of college, it's the level of expectations that either was had or wasn't had. So again, really tapping into all those things and nurturing and architecting organizational dynamics that lend itself to happy teachers, so that we can then have happy teachers creating happy children.
Oh my goodness, this is great. I got goosebumps on my arms listening to all this. This is really, really wise advice we're getting. I appreciate all this. We are right on the hour. So what I want to do, I don't mind if we go a couple minutes over. Are the three of your schedules okay if we go just a couple minutes over?
We're good.
Okay. What I want to do then, I think I'll conclude with kind of we'll do a quick kind of two-parter around the horn. So try to keep answers somewhat concise, but there's one question that I think is really important, especially for our attendees on here. And then the second,
you better repeat that directive, Jason. You said keep answers what?
I said somewhat concise, but I, you know what, I'm a realist as well. And this is important stuff. And sometimes if something's so important, it needs a few more words. I can live with that. This is we're making the rules here. So here's the first one that I'll just go around the horn on. And I know you're going to have big thoughts on this, but what advice would you give to somebody that feels like they may not have the support that they wish they had to either try to build capacity for student resilience or to reclaim their joy? Maybe they're just in a situation, they just don't feel like they have the support structure around them to do that to the extent that they want. So we'll address that one first. Let's go Ms. Davis, and then Dr. Small, and then Principal Jacko.
I would say find your tribe. If you're not getting the support you need from the leadership of wherever you serve, find your tribe. In every organization, in every community, there are people who will be like-minded. And what you have to do is use this amazing technology that gives us all 24-hour access to each other to find your people. They may be local, but they might be far away. And so there are members of the OSG coalition who are on the West Coast. Most of us are here on the East Coast. We're international. Find your people so that you will know where to go and who to call for support. The other piece is professional learning opportunities, particularly in the summer. There are so many of them. Figure out where you are deficient and then go find an opportunity to learn and nudge, request, beg your person who could pay for it to do it for you, or find something free, but own your learning. I think that was concise.
It was great. Power and brevity. Dr. Small.
All right, good luck with my colleagues.
Fia took my answer, but that's fine, because I'm gonna go continue to dig a little bit deeper, because as I wrote down on my pad, seek and ye shall find, and then Fia jumped in and basically said that. But first, I would say, even before beginning that search, figure out your why and stay embedded in that why. Live in that why. And then after you've identified your why, look in the mirror and ask that person in the mirror, who is it that you like to become? Who is it that you are becoming? And stay grounded in that, because I believe that if you know who and what it is you imagine yourself to be, and you're clear about your why, then you'll know where to look when it's time to look for those things.
Really good. So we got find your tribe, find your why, and find your who. This is fantastic. Principal Jacko.
I was that person who didn't have someone who spoke life into me. And so I would say, own it and get a coach. Find a coach, someone to talk to. Get out of your head. And it might be, if you don't see it, it might be time to create it.
Awesome. Okay, last question. We're just going to go around in the same order. I want you can pick, just pick one thing that you could share with us that's either giving you hope right now, or one success that you want to celebrate right now with everybody that's on that you've experienced lately. I'll give you a choice of either one. We'll go in the same order. We'll go Ms. Davis, Principal, Dr. Small, Principal Jacko.
My garden is especially close if someone else could go first.
Not a problem. Let's go, Dr. Small.
So again, when I think about what gives me hope, my father and my family were born on a plantation in South Carolina and went to a one-room schoolhouse. I tell this story frequently. Walked to school with no shoes, right? My mother comes from the small island of Aruba. She's now the chief adolescent pediatric and a pioneer in the field of adolescent pediatrics. And so I tell everybody, I'm only here because I'm doing what I do because I'm supposed to. Right? Because I stand on the shoulders of people who open those doors. And so I also then have a responsibility to broaden my shoulders and ensure that I'm continuing to kick open doors for those who are coming behind me. And I live there. I live in that space. And I honor my parents and my grandparents, my great-grandparents. And it's in honoring them and becoming their wildest dreams that I can then stand in front of children and they can look at me and say, I want to be more like him than I want to be. If I can be more like my principal than the guy up the block who's the dope man, we both listen to the same music, I drive a nice car too, so forth and so on, then I want to be that person. I am a superhero for children, and that's the space I live in, and I'm that superhero because my parents are superheroes to me.
What a great legacy. Thank you. Let's go, Principal Jacko.
One revelation, and thank you, Andrea, for saying that in the chat. One thing I had to own is the fact that the things I might not like in others is screaming as a mirror back at myself. And so understanding that I can be mad much, right? Learning that I can do hard things and I can take the day on. And what gives me hope is that we give so much to others and we don't pour into ourselves. And I'm excited to say that I completed my book and it should be coming out in July. And so the title is Audacity to Speak. And it's about coming out of the trauma of not knowing that my voice mattered. And so even doing something like this, I would have never imagined. And so I would say that's what gives me hope, is knowing that I can do hard things. And sometimes the things that you might feel uncomfortable at others, it might be something that you need to deal with in yourself. And so I would say, reflect. Man in the mirror, them Jacko. I mean, I grew up in the 80s with the last name like Jacko. I have to make a Michael Jackson connection.
Right. If you want to make the world a better place, you better look in the mirror, right?
That's it.
How's it looking over in your
it's a little loud, Jason, but we're gonna see if we can make it work.
But can that just be your statement?
Okay.
You changed your zip code, ma'am. Sorry.
Okay. So what I would say is a couple of things to celebrate, and I believe that's where we began. What are you celebrating? I'm entering year 3 of doctoral study at Fordham University. And so a year from today, you should be introducing Dr. Fia Davis. And I'm very excited. I'm surrounded, if your circle doesn't inspire you, then you don't have a circle, you have a cage. That's what the late Nipsey Hussle said, right? And so I love that I'm surrounded by doctoral candidates and doctors. And then the other thing, we talked about coaching. I'm celebrating that I've officially launched Coach by FIA LLC, executive coaching. And so if you're interested in coaching, I'm in the midst of building the rollout of my consultancy, but please, I urge you to reach out to me, because every executive who is winning at the highest levels has a coach. I have a coach. It is a personal investment I make in myself. I'm surrounded by coaches in the Off School Grounds Coalition. So I encourage you to reach out. And thank you, Mark, Dr. Fia Davis, but please reach out and learn more about Coach by Fia. Let me coach you to and through your dreams and your goals. Jason, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. This has just been incredible. I better round it out. I'll share something that's given me hope. Here's what's given me hope. My oldest son, I have children. I've referenced them on here before. My oldest son graduated just a month ago. He finished, and he's one of those kids. COVID impacted him for 2 years of his high school, and he finished. And I looked around at the graduation, and I saw all these people that had helped, that had an impact in his life. And it was teachers, and it was administrators that knew his name, that knew who he was, that knew what his goals were. And I'll celebrate, and I hate to do this because it sounds like such a brag, but I'm so proud of him because he worked his butt off for this. He got an offer to play basketball at a community college up in Eastern Oregon. I'm so thrilled for him. I'm so excited for him. And you know what? It really did take a village. And so when I do this, this is probably the kind of the bookend I'll put on it. It really struck me when Dr. Small was talking about how we better see these kids as our own kiddos. And it hit me hard at his graduation when I looked around and I saw people that I considered family, that I consider at that auntie or uncle level, that I know have had that impact on his life, and we celebrate it together. And I realize that's how I look at all the kids that I've worked, these kiddos that I've worked with as well. These are my kids. And I love that we can get together in these webinars and try to reclaim that. And I love that word. We picked that word intentionally because I think it indicates that it's a thing we can do, we have to do. We're going to grab that back. We're going to reclaim that joy of why we do this. And I just appreciate all of you as both panelists and attendees that have helped contribute to this. So in conclusion, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. You all did fantastic work today. I think we almost have to do a part 2 because we barely scratched the surface to this. And thank you. Big round of applause to all of our attendees. You keep showing up, and I know you're showing up because 1, you feel a part of this community, but 2, there's something here for you. And hopefully it's an indication that you're finding your tribe here, that you're finding your crew here. I would definitely encourage you to take a look at what the Off School Grounds Coalition has to offer. I'm going to put up a contact slide here right now. If you want to get a hold of any of our panelists, or if you want to check out the OSG website, any of their Insta handles, please check it out and take this advice to heart, because you got a lot of really, really helpful advice. Thank you all for doing what you're doing. You're making a difference in these kiddos' lives. They're lucky to have you. And thank you all to our attendees. I'm going to play us out with some music unless any of our panelists have any parting thoughts before we wrap this up.
I really would love to say, really to you and your audience, thank you, number 1. But number 2, to look at your audience and see that they come from every part of this country. It really gives me hope that this country is more united than it is divided. And so thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to all of the audience members from across the country. It really warms my heart and really helps to give me a little bit of renewed hope around the fact that this is a country more united than it is divided.
Amen to that. What a perfect way to finish out. I'm going to leave this loop up. If you want to get a hold of us, take a look at that QR code, and please don't hesitate